Alright everyone, we start off today with something that would have been the main piece of news a day ago as well, but I actually was in transit, and that's Bret Stephens' meme-worthy, cringe-worthy, viral article with the New York Times talking about Jewish, IQ differences, talking about, specifically the claim of the article is that Ashkenazi Jews think better than people outside of their group because of some intrinsic difference, the ability to think differently being potentially a variance from the status quo in the normal population as an aggregate, and this is why Ashkenazi Jews are superior, basically, is what Bret Stephens is saying. And I'm thinking to myself, I can think of an alternate universe in which the New York Times platforms an article that claims that any other particular group is somehow considerably superior because of some difference, real or perceived. I can see deplatforming on the horizon. Like, think about it this way. Did InfoWars not get deplatformed for less than this? And the New York Times, I mean, by the way, it's like if these tech sites were being fair, they would deplatform them for platforming such an article. If I had a private news website and platformed an article like this, but it was making this claim about white Western Europeans or some other group of people other than Ashkenazi Jews, I think there'd be more at stake. And the funny thing is, the New York Times just came out and defended its platforming of this article. Well, journalism, well, it's okay. It's funny because they're even getting called out by some Jews that are saying, yes, you're making a claim about this group of Jews that is technically positive, but you're also, by doing so, you're claiming difference, and this is racial science. Well, number one, I would say this. There are differences between aggregates of people. If you construct or you have a realistic biologically derived category of people, you can put them at variance from other groups based on their statistical norms, the probability. For instance, the probability that one group of people is tall may be totally different than for another group of people. Where this logic begins to break down is where you're, like with Bret Stephens, where you're giving it some intrinsic cultural importance. You're taking the realm of an objective biological statistical anomaly that you're taking and merely observing, and you give it more importance and try to make it more of a socio-political thing. That's one problem. Also, number two, and I pointed this out before, even where there is a difference between groups of people for aggregated statistical purposes, that doesn't mean that there's necessarily, it's like saying, well, this group of people, the average IQ is 108. Well, then your IQ must be 108 because you're a member of this group. The logic doesn't actually follow. The problem with such statistical material is that even where it is true, it can be used to create artificial importance. For Bret Stephens, therefore, to come out and say, well, some Ashkenazi Jews are able to think in different ways, therefore special or unique in some positive way, is no different than if you were to start rambling about, well, Asians are good at math. Well, white people are good at colonialism or something, or make some other claim. If it were a different claim about a different group, there'd be even more backlash. And the fact is, it was funny because there were some people that came out and criticized this, but from the angle that it was somehow anti-Semitic. And I think, isn't Bret Stephens actually of Jewish extraction, which could be why he's putting a junk science article, a junk science source up and writing an article about it for inexplicably, there's no reason to write the article. The article itself is total bullshit. It was very funny. We've got lots of be-kittying going on, by the way. Always, like for six times already this morning or something, at least one cat's been in my lap. I'm thinking of a situation, though, in which the New York Times was treated the way InfoWars was treated for topical things as far as what kind of news it reported or platformed. Shouldn't the tech firms be kicking the New York Times out for this? Like, shouldn't they be deplatformed from all of the, shouldn't their payment processors stop working with them? Please don't do that, Kitty. Shouldn't the payment processors like Patreon and PayPal and all these other groups, shouldn't they freeze the accounts of all New York Times employees and the company itself for platforming hate? If you made similar claims about other racial groups, it wouldn't even matter if it was a positive or negative claim. If you said some other arbitrary stereotypical trope, you could get deplatformed for it. If the New York Times were an independently functioning body instead of a multinational corporation, they would be disappeared off the fucking face of the internet right now. Now, of course, I'm not proclaiming that that should happen. I'm opposed to all forms of censorship, even of damn dirty corporations run by multinational entities like the New York Times is. But by their own logic, because they're always saying that content creators are responsible even for what their own audience does. Like some YouTuber, one of their audience members shoots somebody, somehow that makes them responsible. Now they have to disavow their own friends and family half the time. Shouldn't the New York Times do the same? Why are they coming out defending this? This comes right in the wake, by the way, of an extremely odd article by WAPO, where they said, well, we called for Northam to resign. You know, the blackface governor of Virginia? We were actually wrong. We retract that retrospectively. So they're okay. Here's the legacy media's logic. It's okay to use even discredited junk racial science, which is what this particular claim is with regards to Ashkenazi Jews thinking differently or something, thinking in a superior way to other groups of Jews or other groups of people. This particular claim is debunked. Anyway, if you look at it that way, the legacy media is saying, so it's okay to produce that sort of article, and it's okay to defend blackface and stuff like that as long as the right people are involved politically or the legacy media is the one actually putting the article out. Can you imagine if a YouTuber did the same things that are being done here? They would be deplatformed. Maybe not completely. At the very least, they'd be considered too edgy to be up next or trending. They'd probably get kicked off Facebook and Instagram. Twitter wouldn't care as much. Jack Dorsey fled the battlefield. He doesn't even give a fuck about his own site anymore. So yeah, I have a problem with this. The article itself, it's like, you know, it's almost a little bit of fake controversy, because it's like, well, it's been discredited. Bret Stephens is basically crazy, so not many people pay attention. The New York Times really isn't a force to be reckoned with anymore anyway. I mean, the number of people that care about what they say is extremely small, probably smaller at this point than most YouTubers' audiences, let alone any mainline site. They really don't have as much of a digital presence. I think they paywall half their articles now anyway. So I can't imagine that their online readership is as high. I know anyone who's willing to pay even 2 cents a month to read their propagandistic swill at this point's got to be crazy. Didn't they face boycott calls, actually, from the left not that long ago? I can't remember what they did to piss people off. But, I mean, if they're going to platform articles like this, don't fucking turn around and be livid when somebody makes similar kinds of material and puts it out in an independent fashion. So the left has embraced racial science and also like blackface, things like that, because of the necessity of looking and realizing that the legacy media and corporate-friendly neoliberal politicians are really the ones that delve into these things. Not YouTubers, not alt-tech, supposedly platforming of hate and extremism and everything wrong in the world. No problem there. The problem comes from Washington Post and the New York Times. And he was trending worldwide, totally viral. Everyone's saying, like, what the fuck is going on here? The New York Times is the arbiter of its own stupidity, and I have a feeling that this article was allowed specifically because they knew it'd be controversial. The problem is that when the New York Times is acting like the Weekly World News, when supposedly accredited, journalistic, above-board, trustworthy publications, you know, what a fucking laugh that is, when they're platforming articles that are largely falsified, largely bullshit, and simply there for clickbait, and they know is going to arouse mostly anger, mostly backlash, I don't understand what long-term marketing strategy they're engaged in, but I have a feeling that basically if Trump were to lose this election within 2 years, half these groups would be kaput. Because that's basically what they're becoming as tabloids, even if he wins. And it's funny because Scott Adams predicted that the legacy media at some point this coming year mostly will latch on to the idea of Trump's inevitability and actually be on board with him. That'd be funny. Yeah, supposedly Trump is responsible for racial attacks against Jews by black nationalists, largely it seems, in the last months. Not that it's not Bret Stephens' fault for deliberately fixating on perceived differences between Ashkenazi Jews and the rest of the population. Again, if you're talking about racial or ethnic or any other differences, Those can be true, but when you take that statistical material and extend it to individuals, like if you say, well, Ashkenazi Jews as a whole, statistically speaking, this is what Bret Stephens' junk science article claims. Again, this is dubious. Well, they think differently, therefore they're able to solve problems in a unique sense, makes them creative, making them fucking movies and stuff. You're literally putting a positive spin on the same conformed statistical material that's seen as a negative by like maybe the alt-right or something. You're making the same basic actual claim. You're just saying that the difference, the variance, is a good thing instead of a bad thing. Thus playing into the handbook of people who care about those differences. I think that you'll find that there are certain political leanings within those groups that Bret Stephens probably himself is not actually a member of. Very interesting. So he should be deplatformed. He should never work again. In a fair world where the same pro-censorship leftists apply the logic to him that they apply to some random buttfuck YouTuber from Indiana, I would assume that he should be deplatformed. Antifa should show up at his house and be like going crazy and all these other things. Is he not a hate-filled individual who believes in racial differences and literally differences in IQ which shall not be talked about on mainline platforms? He's saying the same fucking shit, so shouldn't he be kicked off? Shouldn't YouTube ban Bret Stephens from having an appearance? Shouldn't they ban anyone that platforms him, including the New York Times? Oh no, they get priority status. That's right. They're exempt from the rules that have been created. That's about all. Peace out.